Welcome to the second episode of Widening Circles special guests. This month we have not one but two special guests joining us in Widening Circles. You'll find out more about these special guests, Gareth Williams and Faye Adams, in a little while, and more details about how you can find them in the description. And about Widening Circles for anyone who's not watched yet. I'm pointing to you, Zoe.
So hello everyone from me as well. I just want to point to our intention with offering this to you is just to share some bits of what inspires us as space holders, what is present for us, in the hope that it supports your journey in becoming or being a space holder, a human that is a space holder, a space holder that is maybe an entrepreneur, or maybe just does this as something that you enjoy, or just as a part of enriching your skill set of being a human being that is able to relate with others in deeper and more meaningful ways. So this conversation is part of the wider context of the Widening Circles program, where we bring people from all over the world that have experience in facilitation, therapy, coaching, different modalities, different ways of being with others and supporting others, to be together in a peer space, in a space where we support one another and explore the question of how might we create an environment that is supportive for human growth and flourishing, both for ourselves and for our clients and people we work with.
Welcome to Widening Circles, and our warm welcome to our special guests today, Gareth Williams and Faye Adams. So introducing Gareth first, the welcome. Gareth, who is musician, music producer, reminded that you have a master's with a focus on shamanic music practice. For 30 years and more as a counsellor and mindfulness practitioner, teacher, and supervisor of mindfulness-based practice, counsellors, has trained in, this is a long list, compassion-focused therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, with a focus on an emotional focus on compassion. Also, another surprise, Gareth is full of surprises. I did not know that you were a visiting lecturer for the Doctor in Counselling Psychology at the University of Manchester. Gareth is a teacher with Mindfulness Association, which is how we first connected. And I'm delighted that you're here.
Nice to be here.
Really good. And Faye, another huge long list of Faye trained in social anthropology. Would that be right?
Yes.
And then through chronic pain found a journey to Holy Island and mindfulness, and stayed 6 years on the Holy Island. After a couple of years, 2 years, I think, took retreat with Lama Yeshe Rinpoche. So it's there for many years, is now a lead tutor with the Mindfulness Association, is a teacher at the University of Aberdeen, postgraduate studies in mindfulness. She teaches courses, tasters, retreats, devises curricula for mindfulness, is a member of the core management team for the Mindfulness Association. And yeah, there's so much more. I've needed to skip bits because there's so much for each one of you. But the invitation and the tasty thing for me, very deliciousness, is I've connected with you both and you've supported my journey, both as supervisor and trainer of supervisor, in something that has arrived in this widening circle space, which is connected to joy and love and risking delight. And you've both supported this unfolding in me. You both supported this journey in me along the way. And it's been within our widening circle space, something, that's felt very nourishing. Also, I notice in our communication that also a big part of your practice of holding space is holding space as parents. So I leave it at there because I notice I want to say more and more and more about you and your practice and your journeys. But there's a question. And this question is, after all of hearing this, these journeys that I have a small flavor of, how would you like to be known in this moment, in this space? And you can be with that separately, or as a couple, or as parents, or in any which way you wish. How would you like to be known in this moment?
Just put the power supply in. Do you want to go first, or?
If I was going to go first, I would need quite a long pause. So
Okay,
you've got something ready right now.
Well, I suppose what I thought when you were listing it out is, maybe to some people it might sound impressive, the CV kind of thing, but it's not really, so something like that. Like I'm sure everybody in a way could have map their kind of interesting things. So how would I want to be known in the moment? Maybe not known. Maybe that would be it. Yeah, not known.
I noticed when thinking about being here today, there was a part of me that was psyching myself up to try to project the way I would want to be known to you, so that then you would know me that way. And that felt tiring. And I just couldn't be bothered. So I just kept reminding myself that I didn't need to be known in a particular way that I think is the right way. And enjoying the fact that I could, at least after having talked to myself a bit about it in my mind, that I could then relax, because in previous years and decades, I would definitely in this situation have a lot of tension in my body. And so that's what I've learned gradually as a way of being with myself, to soften up how I want to be known, being in my being. if that makes sense, like kind of the tension of trying to be something. Yeah, that's what comes first.
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah, definitely. That's something, isn't there? Of like, you know, trying to be somebody. You know, it's there's a lot of it around, and yeah, I've definitely wanted to do it, be seen as being cool facilitator or cool this or cool that, and actually it has a big price. It has a big price. So I'm with what she said.
But I still think there's probably somewhere that if I drop to a deeper level, then there would be some way in something I would want to be known as. But I feel like I'd need to sit quietly for quite a while to come up with that. It's like it's deep in, and I haven't been asked that question, so maybe it'll come during the conversation. But there's a feeling that there would be something that would be a more from a wise, deeper place of what I would like to be known as.
So I'm a bit different to that then. I think, like, I don't want to have to be wise or anything either.
I don't think it's about being wise. I think it's coming from a wiser place in me. That's what I mean.
I wouldn't. I think I don't want to even have to do that. I don't mind if it comes. If it comes, then I'm open to that. But if I feel like I've got to be wise, then yeah. In a way, I'd rather not have to be anything. Then you can be anything, can't you? That would be good. So yeah, so in the moment we're kind of got a certain focus on us. So yeah.
I put myself on mute. This magic of mute. So you've not been hearing my interjection. Which is a regular part of my unmute being. Thank you so much. Yeah. As our time unfolds, yeah, maybe each one of us pieces will be known. Thank you. I wonder, Zori, would you like to share the next juicy question that was part of the beginnings? It's the root or part of what we be with at the very beginning of holding this widening circle space, and we've been within this space, each one of us. Would you like to offer that? So, because I'm going to fall over each word. So now that I've said it, I certainly will. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and fall over each word instead of you. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing, Gareth and Faye, and really feels like an honor to be with you. And my question is our question, with which we began with Maria, and with which all of us have gathered around. There's this inquiry that doesn't necessarily have an answer, or maybe has many answers, but we would be very curious to hear from your experience. What is an environment that supports or nurtures growth and unfolding in humans? What is an environment like? What should it be like for that to be supported? Yeah, and you can speak from your own personal experience or from your experience of witnessing what works for others, or perhaps different organizations you've been part of, whatever feels right.
I didn't hear everything you said, sorry. What is an environment that supports growth?
That supports growth and unfolding and learning for humans.
Let's go first.
Okay.
He's quicker. He's more immediate than me. I'm quite slow, so he can fill that gap.
I'll fill the gap. I'll blab something. Okay, so what's an environment? So the first one that comes to mind, the first example that comes to mind is was like a really important beginning experience for me in the field of mental health. And it was a therapeutic community called Lothlorien in Scotland. It's on the internet, so you can look it up if you want to, lothlorien.tc, which stands for Therapeutic Community. I don't think it's lothlorienCommunity.tc. I think it's just lothlorien.tc. But that was great place, big wooden cabin in the hills of Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway, and it was a place where there would be, at the time when I was there was 4 living volunteers, of which I was one, and then there'd be 7 or 8 residents, and the residents had been through quite severe psychological distress or mental illness, whatever you might call that experience, but at the more extreme end, maybe like some kind of manic episode or very deep depression. And it was a place to come and recover and heal. And I saw some people really flourish, like, people who would just not really want to come out of their room, they'd just be staying in their room. And over time, that somebody could like really become like an integral part of the community, playing music, cooking, laughing, really contributing to the community. And interestingly, it was not it wasn't a therapeutic community where they did particular, meeting together and doing therapeutic processes. It was really just about living there and being in that space. And that's where I was introduced to person-centered philosophy, Carl Rogers' stuff, which is very much about these kind of attitudinal conditions, and based on the idea that there's an actualizing tendency. So it's very humanistic, that there's an actualizing tendency in the universe and in each person, and with the right kind of space, which is characterized by these qualities of empathy, unconditional positive regard or respect, and a kind of honesty, without needing to blurt things out, but a kind of people being in touch with themselves as well as with each other. That kind of space, and being connected to nature as well, that also felt really, really important. We've got not a massive amount of gardens, but there was 2 big polytunnels, so there was always salads growing, and we had potatoes and onions, and everybody was chipping in, and that kind of routine. And we see that with the children as well, like at the kindergarten, they're really into routine, and that seems to really hold something. So a kind of, we know what's happening. So there's a lot of not knowing in the world, but we know when lunch is. It's always at 12:30, and somebody be ringing the bell, and supper's at 5:30. So that kind of space connected to the earth, people just friendly, and a sense of taking part. Everybody had something to give. So that's like the first thing that comes to my mind as a kind of healing space. And we're all in it together. It could easily have been me in the residents' shoes, and one of the residents could have been in my shoes. It was like, we kind of prided ourselves that if anybody came to visit, nobody would know who was a volunteer and who was a resident. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And then in terms of my work as a therapist, for being facilitating change and development and facilitating unfolding, I like that word, that unfolding. Then it's difficult to say. I think those conditions of, for me, a kind of gentle, non-judging quality is good, because if there's a quality of sort of like safeness, then you can sort of step into it and you can share things. If there's a sense of, I might get judged, I think it's pretty hard to open up and explore things and let things that are more marginal or more hidden, like let those potentials or difficulties come in. It's hard if there's not the welcome. So a welcome, in a way, a welcome and a non-judging is crucial, but the actual form could be very different. So I was meeting with a new supervisee the other day, a counselling supervisee, and he's like, I really want challenge. It's like, I really want challenge. And I was like, well, you know, what do you mean by that? Because for me, it would be much more about, we'd want to like get a kind of sense of safe space. Whereas he'd got more of a sort of like, I don't know him yet well enough, but he really wanted this challenge. Whereas other people might really not want that. So, you know, it's quite idiosyncratic as to actually, you know, like sometimes we say in compassion or compassion training, the form of compassion is that you can't say this is compassion, because compassion could look very soft and warm and loving, or it could look pretty much like, hey, come on, you know. So it's yeah.
What's coming to mind for me at the moment is quite a process that happens in mindfulness groups, because I mainly hold space in mindfulness groups, where lots of assumptions and beliefs and biases that we tend to hold in according to whatever cultural conditioning we've had and other influences in our lives, that lots and lots of these get softened up by the culture of the group over time. And I'm always surprised when they show up. Like the other day, somebody really showed that it was a very new idea to be open to suffering or difficulty for them, because we're so strongly conditioned to not want to let that in, and that's very unconscious. It's good to be reminded, because I had that too. Very, very strongly. I remember it really clearly at the beginning of when I started to experience health difficulties in my mid-20s. So gradually, these deeply held habits and assumptions are softened through conversation and through the group sharing with each other and watching how the practice unfolds in each other. And the facilitator is obviously kind of midwifing that a little bit. Yeah, you know, like there's so much that I see in our world and in the culture that I'm privy to, which I feel is just really not wise. So, you know, to become a more wise human being, we need to learn how to approach suffering, how to let suffering be there. And if participants can gradually gain confidence that if they do that, it won't upset their whole reality so much that they can't exist anymore, which it might be how it feels at first, then that's a space for unfolding. And there are so many of those. You know, you could look at practices around death, practices around birth. There are so many very complex mistaken understandings of what it is to be a human being, and what our minds are like, and what our hearts are like, and what we need in our culture. So I feel like as a facilitator, I'm often doing my best to open up a space so that we start to see what's actually real, and how it actually is possible to do things differently.
Muted.
Yeah, what I'm noticing as I'm listening is just an appreciation for you know, what you shared, Gareth, around like there's in that space there is no that you encountered in what Lorien, I think it was the name, that there was no process per se. It was just the very way of being there that was so healing to people. And this, you said, no one knows who's a volunteer and who's a participant or a resident, and that's been a big part of also the way we've been approaching this. So really appreciated also like the different qualities you each brought. And for Faye, yeah, I really enjoyed hearing how there's this midwifing, and then the way that related to wisdom and how we approach suffering is as if like the midwife's role is somehow to be there for that person to figure out how to approach the suffering of almost like giving birth to ourselves. So I kind of really enjoyed hearing that. Thank you. Yeah, and I would like to open the space for other questions for others. Anything you heard that you're curious to hear more about?
I have a question. Thank you so much, you two. And Faye, I was delighted to hear you mention the word softening, which at the moment for me is playing a huge role, and which I find such a helpful metaphor, and noticing what is going on in myself and how much hardening has happened there over decades, and which is now beginning to soften. And I'm just curious, what other associations you have, or experiences or teachings about softening?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. I mean, what immediately springs to mind is my very long journey with chronic pain, which began in my mid-20s and is really, in a way, a kind of background thing in my life now. I wouldn't say it's like completely gone, but it was very much in the foreground of my life for maybe 15 years. And I think that journey, I could give it many names, but one name could be a journey of softening. Because I think for some reason my body had absorbed many pressures and tensions from just living life that had hardened into a kind of way of holding myself, many habits, you know, and it held in all the little muscles in my body that produced pain and produced a kind of a sort of like an energetic condition that was hardened somehow. I mean, you could call it a kind of some people might sort of see it as like an egocentric, a version of egocentricity. I sometimes thought of it as that, which feels also like a hardening, which of course we all have. And I think really gradually I had to, and I suppose it goes back a bit to what I was saying about sort of softening all these beliefs and assumptions we have from our conditioning. I had to undo a lot of this. And that's what my work was on the Holy Hour when I was around sort of in most of my 30s, really, in my little meditation hut. learning how to soften and let go of all this holding on I was doing. And mindfulness and meditation and the spiritual path were really that was what was able to make a difference. Nothing else. And I did look high and low in conventional medicine, in alternative medicine, everywhere you can imagine. Nothing else made a difference. That was what made a difference. And that's what the healing was for me. And that's why my practice is, it can never be anything other than with the body and in the body. And it had to always be like that. And that's what I mean, at first I was not in my body, and it felt like I couldn't be, but the journey was to learn to be. Yeah, and yeah, you asking that question is like a really lovely, it felt really nice to be asked that, because I can really feel how even you asking it was reminding me again, this sort of softening, which just feels really important all the time for me, actually. Thank you, Michaela.
I have something I'd love to ask. I heard unlearning. A series of, it wasn't unlearning, but it's close to this unlearning. I'm curious if there's something at this moment or about now that you are moving through unlearning, that you're noticing is there to be. Anything in your, I know, there's a house move and a change and a transition for you and your parents. Beautiful young boy. I wonder if there's anything of unlearning around for you at this moment.
I guess for me, that thing that we talked about at the beginning about how do you want to be known, and saying the thing about, if you're trying to be something, you want to be something. I think it ties in very much to what you're saying. I think it's my sense with the body, like, I want to be something. And I mean, like, it's almost like, of course you do. Of course we do, don't we? We do. And it's, but there's a massive cost to it. I think it's a bit like, we said in that the Carl Rogers thing about unconditional worth and conditional worth. Like, if you want to pass your driving test, or you want to get a qualification, or perform a certain role, like if you want to be a counsellor, then you probably you've got to do your training, and you've got to show certain abilities and pass your essay or do your case studies or whatever. So there is a sort of conditionality there, isn't there? It's like, well, we'll deem you okay if you can show us this. So there's a place for that, isn't it? It's like, well, that makes sense, but not to confuse that with your basic being, not to so merge yourself with your role that you lose touch with, it's just okay. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and noticing the sky. We got a really lovely big window here, and the sky is always there, and it's just that sort of basic, just okayness, and now these days I just think that's so valuable. I don't know why, but it just seems so important. So that's kind of, I think, what's the sort of what I'm moving through is sort of getting to grips to that, or understanding the pervasive suffering that comes from that. You know, like at school, in most schools, it's like, you know, who gets the golden star, who's the good one, who's, you know, and winners need losers, don't they? And it's like, it's not so good. It's like there's a sort of place for it, but you know, I was talking to somebody the other day in a session, and we were saying about playing a game. When I was a kid, I used to play a game with my mum and dad, this card game, and I'd cry, like really, like I would just be so into it if I lost. You know, I'd gone so into it that I really was upset if I lost. So it's a bit like, you know, we want to be able to play these things and give yourself to the thing, but not to somehow totally lose yourself in it. So to play the game, but not forget it's a game. It's a game. It's not everything. You know, so you didn't pass your exam. Not to worry.
But what about as a parent and in moving house, Maria mentioned? I'm trying to feel into that part of our lives. Unlearning.
I remember with being a dad at one point, and it was early on, and my son had been crying, and on one occasion I learned that if I held him really tightly, he sort of stopped crying and fell asleep. So I thought, I've cracked it now. Now I know what to do. So I tried to apply that the same the next day, and it didn't work, and it just escalated and escalated and escalated until eventually Mum swooped in and saved him. You know, and afterwards I felt awful. I had this like wave of just like, we live in psychological times, you know, and this wave of, oh, have I traumatized him? You know, went over me, and oh, I'm a terrible dad, and I haven't got a clue. And there was something about that just went through. Because I got some idea of practitioner, I just lay on the bed, and it just waved through, like it just this strong intensity came through. But then it was gone. It was like it just came and it went. So I don't know how that's totally relevant, but it was something about, I thought to myself, if you really didn't have that, you could easily sort of like tighten up and think I should be, a bit like I imagine, and I don't know, we don't speak as an expert on this at all, complete non-knowing on this. I imagine with some forms of like postnatal depression, you might think, I should be a loving mum, or I should be this. And then like, you know, twist it, you know, rather than just having a sense of, oh, you know, I'm knackered or whatever, and I'm not totally feeling connected with this being, and that's okay, and that can move through. But something of, again, of like an investment or an idea of should, that there's something in that. So I don't know, I'm not quite sure how that connects, but that was popped up.
I can think of an example of unlearning, just like a sort of more particular example. In mindfulness of a relationship with Gareth. So if we're if we're kind of coming into a little bit of a conflict about something, my automatic reaction is that I want to fix it and get through it to the other side now, and I want to be really, really engaged with it to try to resolve. And recently, well, maybe over the last year or two, I've noticed that since I've started to unlearn that, the whole thing resolves a lot quicker. So if I kind of just leave it be, and leave Gareth be, he resolves himself, and it all blows over much quicker. Like it could be days quicker. So that's a really important piece of unlearning for me. If I just leave it be, now I have enough trust to know that Gareth will probably come and find me in an hour or half an hour, and it'll be changed by then. It's an example of unlearning.
So maybe there's a sort of core theme of leaving things be, letting it. Oh, I'm terrible. I'm not good at this. Oh, and then it's gone.
Thank you. Letting it be. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I had a question that's perhaps a little bit related to what you just pointed to with leaving things be, because my question is going to be, how is this for you? But I'll just say where it comes from in me. This question, I did also acceptance and commitment therapy with the mindfulness that is in there. So we didn't do separate mindfulness, but only within the context of ACT, and also, meditation retreats, things like that. And I noticed that my attention got actually more and more refined and attentive for everything. But it also caused like a new sort of challenge, because I could be a little bit hooked on all my experiences, like taking everything almost too serious and be too attentive almost of every little thing in a conversation, or every little thing in a situation, or every little thing in a body. And my question is, how do you both navigate that in yourself when it comes to giving attention, or also disregarding it, which has perhaps its own wisdom?
It's a good one.
Yeah. I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I guess there's a sense of yes, it's a good question, isn't it? It's like or a bit like when is it a good time to leave it be, and when is it a good time to sort of work on it, I suppose. Like, how do you know? How do you know?
I think there's something about the balance between being up close and spaciousness. So if you can kind of move between those, and if you can identify when you're maybe too up close, too identified, and know that spaciousness is there as another place to be in response to that. The spaciousness usually reveals what's needed, I think. And I certainly also have a tendency to get too close in, and too aware of everything, and I think I take refuge in space, in a sense of spaciousness, or it might not be spaciousness specifically. It might be like a heart, a quality of resting in the heart, or softening, from what Michaela said. And all of these just kind of let things find their place a little bit.
I've got a sense of maybe you could also have a sort of experimental approach to it. Like what's it like, over time, just to explore the sort of different patterns and learn for yourself. Like what happens if I, give my attention to it, and what happens if I just, refocus my attention elsewhere. And just you could have it like, what's it saying in that poem, Rainer Maria Rilke? Live the question. Have it. I think it's a really good question, and just be curious about that. because I mean, definitely working with, I know there's certain little sticky bits in my mind where I can get like worried or anxious about things. So, you know, it's a bit like it's caught on, something's caught on to something. So with those situations, I think, and with clients, you know, it's definitely like, it's dead easy to sort of zoom in and imagine all the possibilities and what does this mean. And so it's a bit like, yeah, maybe that's where we could do with practicing the other, just leave it, see what happens. Let's just go with leave it and see what happens.
I think Gareth and me are different in this regard. Like if you look at us in how we relate to each other, Gareth likes to just leave things. And sometimes that's really annoying because he wants to leave them all the time, you know, and avoid them, really, in my opinion. But I need to learn more about that. I need to learn, as I just gave that example from before, I need to learn more about letting things be, because I tend to get all involved and kind of, you know, far too sort of, in earlier parts of my life, far too identified with all the dramas of my inner world. But I think there's something in that is also precious. There's something about that I do tend to kind of want to get right in with, and I'm really curious and I want to know all about it. I don't want to avoid it. I really want to be engaged with it and come through it and see transformation happen and all that kind of thing. Yeah, so but that's the bit I already have within me as a natural tendency. So for me, Gareth teaches me how to leave things be. That's his. Did you know that you do that?
No.
There you are.
Thank you.
Feels like there's space for another question before maybe our bodies need tending to away from screen. Is there anything else bubbling?
I have something. I'm curious about that space or closeness between your space holding and your relationship. Somehow, yeah, what are the ways that your relationship is informing your space holding and vice versa? And what are the ways in which you like to keep them separate? So I'm curious around that dynamic, because I've noticed in my experience it's sometimes a little bit difficult to let be and leave that space holder part to rest in intimate partnership. And yeah, and at the same time it does help in some ways. So I'm curious, like, yeah, anything you have to share around this intersection.
I think there's a lot of different answers to that question. I think and it's a really interesting question, because there are all sorts of dynamics there. I think Gareth and I over the years have facilitated each other on request, and I really like being facilitated by Gareth and find it really helpful. And at the moment we don't have much time to do that because we're too busy. But yeah, that has been a really cool part of our relationship. But I am also a little bit allergic to being facilitated if I haven't requested it. And I can remember a few times saying to Gareth, I don't want to be facilitated, I want to talk to you.
That's the tone.
Because it feels like he's not really there in the same way. I want to relate to him and not be facilitated sometimes in these moments. Yeah, so I can remember that. But I think there's sort of degrees of facilitation also, because if you facilitate a lot and if you have a practice, then there might be some degree of very subtle facilitation going on undercover all the time. So that's interesting as well. What
I quite like that. Would you call it facilitation? Is that
what would you call it?
I don't know. I was thinking the word manipulation was coming to mind.
That's a good question. Whether, yeah, when would it be facilitation? When would it be manipulation?
Well, I don't know. I couldn't think of an example. Really, I really couldn't. But I just thought when you said that, like undercover, if you're a skilled practitioner, you can be undercover. Or what I was thinking, like in terms of like, you know, like learning from the relationship, and then you work as a facilitator or as a space holder, as you're talking about it. I think it has been really useful. Like probably in this relationship with Faye, which is the longest relationship I've had with somebody in an intimate relationship. Like I somehow have a sense of the challenge of it. Like, you know, and I think maybe once upon a time, and maybe still a little sort of like romantic ideal of, you know, oh, somebody would be really all nice, you know, like the fairy tales, you know, and they lived happily ever after. But now I think that I would like to write a song about that and challenge that fairy tale thing. And, you know, if you could put that out into the world, just like, you know, that it is difficult, it is ups and downs, and that's okay. That's okay. That's pretty good. And especially if you're into growing or spiritual practice or something, that's great, isn't it? Might not feel it at the time, might feel pretty bad at the time, but and so now I think having that from the relationship, feel like when I work with others, I can genuinely offer that. Like a different myth about relationship. Different myth.
I think Gareth's what Gareth knows, because of being a facilitator and a counsellor, and you know, all of what he's done in his work, is definitely really key to our relationship being as it is, and the ability to work through things. That's really very important that's there. Like you told me once that before you learned how to be a facilitator, you didn't know how to listen.
Oh yeah, probably.
But he's good at listening now.
Sometimes.
When you decide to be.
When I decide to be. Or when I need to be.
And another thing is, I suppose, like both of us work online, and you know, many do quite a lot of sessions every week, and there's always you know, every so often a session one of us comes out of and we just feel like, oh, that really didn't go well, or I'm really feeling my self-critic kicking in here, and we tend to kind of talk about that, you know, straight away when we come out. There's the person, there's the other one in the kitchen, and we can just kind of say it, and it's really nice to have that space to do that. And Gareth usually quite quickly says something about just, you know, it's all right to be it. What do you usually say? So it's all right to not be something that I think I should be, or whatever it is, and that quickly kind of helps me to let it go.
Thank you. That's beautiful to hear. And I'm also noticing just in the way that you speak about it, there's something about the appreciation for learning from one another, whether that's facilitated or subtle or not facilitated, or just having that spirit feels very beautiful to witness. So thank you.
It was a pleasure.
If you want to find out more about Faye and Gareth, and also about the Widening Circles, you can find that in the description underneath this video. And also, if you're interested in following what we share on a monthly basis here from people that inspire us as space holders, you can click the subscribe button so that you will be notified next time there is a new video up and running. And without further ado, we're looking forward to hearing from you also in comments about your experience as you listen through this episode, and anything you feel like sharing with us, just opening and widening the circle of the conversation to include you as well. And thank you so much for listening and being part of this.